Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and if you're wondering what I'm drinking while I'm decorating this, it is this delicious milk tea with pearls. What's your favorite bubble tea order? Anyway, let's get into making this cake. I am just taking a 4-inch chocolate cake, adding in some of this simple syrup, which is basically 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of warm water, and then filling this up with some delicious chocolate buttercream. If you want to make this Cookie Monster themed through and through, I highly suggest that you add some crumbled up cookies to each of the layers or put some cookie crumbs into your buttercream to create a cookies and cream buttercream. Now, as I'm filling this cake, I'm being fairly generous with all of that frosting. You can fill it up as much as you would like. I generally like to give a generous dose of the filling. This keeps it nice and moist, and also it makes sure that your filling flavor comes through. And whenever you're filling and crumb coating with buttercream or the same filling, you really don't have to worry about overfilling those layers because anything that seeps out will just go on to the crumb coat itself. What I love about this cake as well is we don't have to level it off at all. We do want that bumpy domed section so that our cookies will look more piled up and our Cookie Monster will have a place to sit. Now I'm going to create the cookie jar portion of the cake by just taking some white fondant and really kneading it together. If you ever notice that your fondant is quite dry, just add a little bit of shortening to it and it will bring it back to life and make it the correct texture. I'm adding a little bit of cornstarch on here to make sure that nothing sticks, and notice I am picking up that fondant quite a few times and moving it around. This just prevents it from sticking to the surface. Now I'm going to wrap it around. If you've watched my videos before, then you know whenever I'm working on a really small cake like a 4-inch cake, I do like to use the wraparound technique instead, just because I find it a little bit more difficult to do it when you just place it on top of the cake and then try and smooth it out that way. I find I get a lot of tearing happening. However, for all other cake sizes, I do generally use the other method. Now I'm going to add the little band that's going to go at the bottom of the cookie jar. And I did steam my cake just a slight bit to put this on. And I'm going to take an X-Acto knife just to make sure that I get that the right size. Now, if you want to know how I got this writing onto here and how I'm actually doing this, then you can go ahead and check out that video in the right-hand corner. I also think the look of pop-out fondant letters in white would also look really, really good with this too. Now I'm going to be taking some baby blue fondant that I already had and turning it into a darker blue. I'm just adding a little bit more sky blue and some royal blue as well. And for all of the products that I'm using, I'm putting them down in the description box below. I am adding a little bit of shortening to this and then I do let it rest. Now you guys know I generally don't like coloring anymore with gel food coloring, but that's all I had available. Instead, I would use Fond Dust. Now, I always use this method whenever I can get away with it, but I generally like to build my fondant characters directly onto the cake. So if they're not standing up characters that need to dry on their own, this is the way that I do it. And you'll notice I'm being very, very haphazard with the way that I'm creating this Cookie Monster. And that is because I am going to texturize the whole thing anyway. So all we're really looking for is the general shape of the Cookie Monster. And the bottom really doesn't have to be that perfect at all because it's all going to get covered with cookies. Now, this is really important here. Now, if you want this to sit a little bit more inlay, I suggest you go a little bit thinner with the fondant and press it in a little bit more than I did. That way, when you texturize here with your scissors, you're going to be able to kind of pull that fur over top so it looks more realistic, kind of like the puppet. This is one of the most satisfying things, but I must admit that because we're working with really, really small scissors, I did get a little bit of a hand cramp doing this. Now, don't worry if you don't get to this step in time and you're noticing that you're getting a little bit of flaking. That's kind of what you want. It's really going to work in your favor when you're creating this texture. As I recall from watching Sesame Street as a little girl, the fur is quite scraggly. Also, I wouldn't be too picky about all of those little fallout pieces we're getting on top of the cake. It's all fondant, it's all edible, so I'm just going to leave it and cover it up with cookies. Giving my cake a little bit of a steam to resaturate that color as well as heat up that buttercream just a slight bit so I can add on all of these delicious mini cookies. You can use your homemade cookies. You can also use larger ones, but I think for this smaller cake, these small ones look perfect. And plus you can pack in a lot more cookies this way too. If you have leftover buttercream, you can also build up this cookie mountain just a little bit more using that. Now I'm cutting another fondant band, which is going to act as the top of the cookie jar. Now, if you don't want to add this and you just want that nice straight edge look for your cookie jar, then make sure that when you're cutting off the fondant in the first place, that you're very, very careful with how you cut it. Now, in order to adhere this, I really like to steam my cake and then just put the detail on that way. I find it easier to control than painting things on with water or edible glue. Now I'm going to finish up my Cookie Monster, and the reason that I'm doing these arms now is so that the cookies are really all around the Cookie Monster, and then his arms are going to be laying on there. This is a great starter cake too if you're just starting out with fondant characters, because the shape is relatively easy and it can always be fixed with all of that texturization. I'm going to make this a little bit more playful and make it look like he's actually eating the cookies. So I created the arms the exact same way, and I just bent that other arm so it looks like he's eating. And for the last time, we are going to texturize this using our scissors technique. Now, if you don't want to use fondant, you could definitely use Rice Krispie treats or even cake to create the shape of your Cookie Monster, and then you could cover everything with a grass tip and blue buttercream. Now, if I actually look at the traditional character of Cookie Monster, he has kind of a smallish head in comparison to his whole body. I'm kind of doing it the other way around because I want this to kind of look more like a baby Cookie Monster. So I made his head a little bit bigger, and I'm giving him those classic big eyes. I rolled pieces of white fondant into little spheres, and now I am taking some black food coloring, painting that on. I'm not even bothering using any vodka or extract. When it's just this little amount, it doesn't make too much of a difference, and then I'm adding little pieces of white fondant to the eyes. To make this even more playful, I'm going to put cookie crumbs all the way down the Cookie Monster, and of course he has to have a cookie in his mouth as well. Now I am placing these on with tweezers because it is tough to get those little tiny pieces where you want them. And I'm also putting them down the cookie jar as well. I feel like this adds a really fun note, but you can leave it nice and neat and tidy if that's what you would prefer instead. You can also make your Cookie Monster look a little bit more Cookie Monster-esque by making his eyes going all over the place and not just straight on like these eyes. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake. And of course, from the video title, you already know how much I would charge for this cake, but I'm going to break it down for you just a little bit further. So first of all, let's begin to talk about the sizing. Now, this is a pretty small cake. It's a 4-inch standard cake. It's not an extra tall or anything, but don't underestimate the size of this cake. It can actually feed quite a bit. If this is being served at a party, it can probably feed about 8 to 10 people, especially if there's other food being served as well. And as soon as we get a fondant character on there, the price for me goes right up because fondant characters are a lot trickier. There's a lot more things involved than just like a flat decal or a flat 2D fondant shape. We also have all of that hand painting in gold, and the gold is a little bit expensive, and we also have all of those cookies. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!